This segment is brought to you by Cardiovascular Institute of the South, providing our patients the highest quality cardiovascular care available.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. We are very glad for people who take so much time out of their very busy schedules to take care of letting us know, letting you know all the things going on here politically. Welcome back, Beryl Amedee. We appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. Of course, Beryl, we're very glad, represents State Representative, District 51, and making sure that we are taking care of everything. And all those people in your district can see us as we share this information.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming legislative session.
Sure. This year's session is a fiscal-only session, which means we start in April. And we'll go in session on April 14th, and we'll be there till June 12th, unless we finish early, which is always a hope, but rarely
Cross
ever
your
happens.
Fingers.
Yes. Yes.
With the volume of things y'all have to go over and discuss, it's hard to believe y'all ever finish early.
Right. And so being a fiscal session, that means that all the legislators can file as many bills as they want to that involve fiscal issues, the budget, taxes, fees, and all
everything
that.
related to finance.
Finance. But if it's not a finance bill, a fiscal bill, we're limited to 5, no more than 5, and they have to be filed 10 days before session starts. And so we have been in bill filing rush for a couple of weeks here, and the bills are being published almost hourly. They increase because the staff is finishing up the drafts as we speak. And so as of midday Wednesday, I believe the House bills were up to 370-ish, and the Senate bills were about 110. But they're not going to stop there. I predict that by the time all the bills are filed for the session and we include resolutions and such, I think we're going to have about 1,200 instruments because that's average.
Yeah, and we're at 600, right? You know, as of yesterday, we're right up there by 600.
Very close, and so it'll keep going. It'll double before long.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people were asking. You had a lot of constituents wanting to find out about these constitutional amendments, and they all failed.
They did.
Here this past weekend. Can we talk a little bit about the impact of that?
Sure. I believe that the impact for each of the amendments, it's directly related, of course, to what the amendment would have done.
Right.
And so we have the first one had to do with the scheduling of the elections. And I'm sorry, the first one had to do with the ability of the Supreme Court to discipline out-of-state attorneys when they practice here if they do something wrong.
Right.
And it also would have allowed the legislature to set up specialized courts, which are not specialty courts. But these items failed, so that won't change.
Can't change anything with that.
Yes. And amendment number two was the one that included so much because it was a total rewrite of an entire article of the Constitution.
Right.
And so I'll come back to that in a second.
Right.
Amendment number 3 was the one that
About 16-year-olds.
minors, felony offenses. We have 16 felony offenses listed in the Constitution, and this bill would have taken the list and moved it to statute, and it would have left the words in the Constitution, certain felony offenses. That way, when crimes change, we don't have to always go back to the voters and change the Constitution just because there's a new crime or one that needed to move.
We didn't have before.
Right. And then number 4 was to provide for the election dates to fill judicial vacancies. And the reason we needed that one was because when we passed the bill a year ago that dealt with closed party primaries, judicial seats were included in closed party primaries. But the laws didn't align as far as the specifics to the dates, the deadlines to fill those vacancies. And so that would have fixed it. So getting back to number 2, that was the one that I got the most calls about for sure. Because it did so many things, or it attempted to do so many things. So moving forward, here's what we're not going to have the benefit of. We're not going to have a cap on the maximum individual income tax rate. Right now, we're at 3%, but without this cap, the current cap that still exists is, I think, 4.75. So a future legislature could go ahead and increase the individual income tax, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do away with it in a couple of years. Another thing that did not pass was the increasing of the tax deduction for seniors over 65. So We did increase it some during the special session, but
Right.
this would have doubled it.
Right.
And so that's not going into effect right now. Also, we had a formula to keep the government from growing faster than the economy. And so we do have a type of government growth limit right now, but
Right.
it's so high we really don't ever hit that ceiling. So this would have been able to keep the government growth in check. And so it did a few other things. And I believe that the most controversial thing that it did was it divided the church property tax exemption to where part of the protection would have remained in the Constitution and the other part would have been over in the statutes along with all of the nonprofit property tax exemptions. And I believe that that one was seen as so controversial that it drove many voters to just vote no on the whole thing.
Right.
It was basically, you messed with the churches. Don't
Yeah.
mess with the churches.
Right. And quite frankly, a lot of those where they come together and we see so many different pieces to it, and that is probably something you see all the time in these bills or proposed bills that, legislatures will say no to that because, oh, you tried to slide this in here.
Right.
And you didn't try to slide anything in, or, the amendment didn't try to slide anything in. It was just a way to really adjust for all of those tax brackets, including how that impacted the churches as well. And
Right.
the people that went out said no, and I know it was a low turnout.
Yes. And it's true. It reduced the protection a little bit.
Right.
And so that was
That's how that
true.
works. Beryl, we appreciate your time as always. We'll stop and do this again. Is
Sure.
that okay?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Beryl's going to join us. You do that with us. We'll be right back, right here on this edition of Bayou Time.
This segment was brought to you by Barker Honda. It's better at Barker.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad to be joined again by Ms. Beryl Amedee. Beryl, thanks again for being here.
Well, thank you, Keith.
All right, Beryl, of course, State Representative, District 51. And we were talking a little bit about the failure of these constitutional amendments. The one that impacts Article 7 is really going to impact what happens here in this fiscal session. Let's talk about the impact of that.
Sure. The second amendment that was on the ballot would have rewritten all of Article 7. And it's Article 7 of the Constitution that really has the legislature bound when we're trying to deal with the budget because it locks up everything to where we can hardly touch anything. And
Right.
that's when we always come out with, why do you always cut health care and education? Well, they're kind of the only things that are not locked up. Plus, they're the two biggest parts of the budget.
Right.
So here's where we're standing right now. Right now, the budget as proposed by the governor is slightly smaller than last year. Last
Okay.
year's budget was about $50 billion. This year's is about $49 billion. The forecast, though, is that we're expecting $194 million shortfall. And so without the passage of that constitutional amendment, we're going to have to find the $194 million somewhere within what we can touch. And
Right.
so here's the current status. As was spoken when the governor presented his budget or when his staff presented the budget, there is no funding in the proposed budget for teacher pay raises. So the $2,000 stipend from last year is gone. It's not in the budget. The differentiated compensation, where they pay more for teachers who are
Certified.
strongly needed because there's a shortage,
Oh, right.
like maybe the higher maths or maybe special ed. The differentiated compensation is funded. It's $17.5 million. The Gator program, which is the ESAs, Education Savings Accounts,
Right.
that program is funded. Its total altogether is going to be $93 million, but that's rolling over the voucher students into the Gator program. So
Okay.
it's the voucher money being moved in plus the Gator funding totals $93 million.
Okay.
The high dosage tutoring is funded again at $30 million and early childhood at $410 million. So those things are funded about the same as in the budget that we're currently under. No big changes right there. But because of the shortfall, this week the governor issued a hiring freeze of all state jobs, civil service employees, and that's expected to save about $20 million. So it's a step. We still have a ways to go before we reach the 194, but that's one of the things
Right.
that the governor can do, and he has now issued that freeze. So we'll be looking into that. So
And we always have the bills that you have pre-done, the ones you've pre-filed. So let's talk about some of those that you feel like will make an impact.
Sure. Well, because we have to pre-file the non-fiscal bills, the bills that have been pre-filed are mostly not bills that are related to the budget. Those are going to be filed starting next week. They'll be pouring in. There's a few, but I haven't worked on mine yet because I was busy with the other ones.
Of course.
So some of the bills,
pre-file those early.
Yes, the ones that had to be pre-filed had an earlier deadline. So some of the ones that I'm bringing that I believe the public would be most interested in would be a bill that says it's called Free Exercise of Religion, and it simply says that when there are certain mandates coming down, like we saw during the pandemic, that a church can't be treated any worse than the least regulated business.
Okay.
And that's just fair. And that bill actually passed before, but under our previous governor, it was vetoed. So we're bringing that back. Another one is going to prohibit employers from discriminating based on medical intervention status. So
good.
That includes
pre-existing needs.
Yes, and that includes vaccine status, because there are some employers that want to mandate certain vaccines, and if a person refuses to get a particular vaccine, it can become an issue. So this would prohibit all that. And another one prohibits the release of engineered pathogens. So that sounds kind of futuristic, I suppose, but it really just means self-spreading vaccines. So it will criminalize the release of any self-spreading vaccine if you've spread it in such a way that it can reach individuals who have not been fully informed and consented. So I think that'll be interesting.
Absolutely. I like that. And so I know that we've got all these interesting bills, and you'll be able to do that. Is there anything that you've read, any of the ones that are coming up that seem interesting to you in addition?
I'm glad you asked. There are a few, and there'll probably be a few more, but so far we've got some fun ones.
All right.
One of them deals with NGOs. That stands for non-governmental organization. And if anybody's been following the DOGE quest at the federal level, you've heard NGOs.
Sure.
Well, we have NGOs at the state level too. And this one would require that any NGO funding that is requested is no longer going to be included in our budget bills. They're going to have to be in standalone bills where the NGO will have to come before the committees, and there'll be transparency because they'll be asked a lot of questions, because it's kind of unusual to think about. But if it's a non-governmental organization and it receives government funding, is it now a government organization?
Yeah. Well,
to some extent.
Yeah. So you got a separation of church and state right there.
Well, it's not even necessarily church.
I know. Yeah, but situation.
And the last one really quick is to allow people to buy their auto insurance policies in Texas, Arkansas, or Mississippi. And if they do, and they get into any kind of an accident or end up in court, they would have to agree to abide by the laws of the state where they bought their insurance.
What a great idea. Give us some opportunities, because car insurance, I can tell you, in Louisiana is almost as bad as flooding house insurance.
Yes.
Beryl, thank you for all the updates. Good luck in the session. We'll look forward to hearing updates from you during that.
Sure.
All right. All right, guys, and that will do it for this particular session and this Bayou Time, but don't go anywhere. I got a whole lot more right here on HTV.
This segment was brought to you by Trapp Chevrolet. We're always on your side.